Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Today, we have a really exciting show. It's in regards to the Crime and Author series. And the author today of a book called The Godfather of Homicide, Vernon J. Gebeth, a cop's cop. And he absolutely is a cop's cop. We're going to get into some of the book, some of his war stories, as we call them, as us coppers call them, and realize this, that he also had a book out called Practical Homicide Investigation that was and is the Bible of homicide investigation, probably worldwide. I remember as a young supervising sergeant in the detective bureau being mesmerized by this book and learning about homicide and how to respond to the scene, the do's and don'ts, and the taking the chances and the learning from, believe it or not, and I was a boss almost my whole career, learning from detectives. Any boss that goes into the detective bureau and doesn't learn from the detectives is a boob. I'll tell you that right now, because detectives can teach you a hell of a lot. And because you outrank them, that's ridiculous to think that you can't learn from them, because you absolutely 100% can, should, and will learn from detectives. And I'm sure Lieutenant Commander Gebeth will tell us the same thing, because he's a humble man also. And I remember reading in his book how he said he would learn from detectives. So folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your wig, hold on to your toupee, hold on to your cup of coffee. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. It's time to head to the track as the first leg of the Triple Crown. The Kentucky Derby is here. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your Kentucky Derby info and sports betting action. With the largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA and NHL playoffs to the Major League Baseball and UFC and boxing, BetOnline has you covered for all your online wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, I'd like to invite to the show Lieutenant Commander retired Vernon Gebeth. Vernon, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bill. Thank you very much. It's great to be back and to talk with you. And I remember the last time we were talking, you were talking about how important the rank of sergeant is. I got to tell you, as a detective sergeant was probably the most fulfilling assignment I had, because you're high enough to protect yourself and low enough not to lose your common sense. So that was my claim to fame. But getting to the Godfather of Homicide, this was basically a legacy book. It's not a book to make money. It's a book about having a record of how I got to where I got, because you don't get to have this reputation without doing a lot of work. And most of the work I did was as a detective sergeant. That's where I learned homicide. Surrounded myself with the best, learned from the best, and kept notes. And basically that protocol became the textbook eventually. But let's jump right into it. You know, I'm finally in homicide. I've gone through all the narcotics and all the other crap that you got to go through. I'm finally a supervisor in the Bronx homicide, 7th homicide zone, busiest zone in the city. 225 homicides a year in a 6.5 square mile area. That's homicide.
Yep, absolutely.
But I talked the last time about skills we had as youth, skills we had as prior employment, being able to take that forward. One of the skills in narcotics, of course, was the use of informants, taping, documenting the case so you can build it. And we're going to start off with the first case. I'm very proud of this case because it was very fulfilling. It's a Sunday night in the South Bronx. It was kind of quiet, oddly. And about 10:30 at night, an informant came in to speak to one of my detectives, Richie Rivera's, and we both assumed he was there to talk about open homicides. All right. And him and the detective went to a separate room. And about 10 minutes later, Detective Rivera comes out and says, "Hey, boss, you better come in here. This is a little bit bigger than what I thought." It turned out that this guy had a contract, a $15,000 contract to do a hit. And the hit involved killing his wife, but he also was talking about killing a New York City cop. Well, at that point, I'm saying, whoa, okay, we're going to talk about this. Now, thank God I had better narcotics, because he was talking about a major Colombian drug dealer who had just recently been released. In fact, it was Saturday. He finally got out on bail, and he wanted to kill the cop before trial, which was coming up in May. And so he's discussing the case, and I'm taking notes. And basically, I had him do I taped his interview because I wanted to have a documentation. And then I had him make a phone call to this subject, who was very reluctant to talk. Don't forget, we're dealing with a major violator. However, there was enough in that conversation to lend us to believe we had an important operation on hand. Well, now we're talking to him, and I get off the phone with the people I'm talking to. And I want to find out what case he's talking about. So I call up OCCB, and I'm asking about major cases in Queens. And all of a sudden, it turns out this was a big case the year before. In fact, I had remembered hearing about this case. I had just left OCCB. And
Lieutenant, OCCB, for those that don't know, is
I'm sorry, the Organized Crime Control Bureau.
And
narcotics.
There's a narcotics branch. There's a major case branch, right? There's all different. There was a OCCB public morals. So there were different investigative bodies under the OCCB title. I just want our listeners to know that.
Right. So I call up, and it turns out, ironically, to be a friend of mine, George. He was the case officer. I tell him, "George, listen," I says, "we're talking to somebody right now who's talking about doing a hit. I don't know if the contract went out to anybody else, but I want you and your family to get out of the house tonight. Do you trust me, George?" He says, "Absolutely, Vernon, whatever you say." I said, "Don't tell anybody anything. Just go someplace in case there's more than one hit, because I don't trust this guy." And he did that. Now we have the information. I know the case. All right, we're putting it together. And now he continues, at which time he drops a bomb on our lap. "I also want to report police corruption." Oh, shit. Here we go. Soon as you mention corruption, the bells, alarms go. IAD gets involved. It's the last thing I fucking need is internal affairs in this plot to kill a cop. But I know what I got to do. I call up IAD. I get a control number. They want to talk to the informant. He's no longer here. "I'll see you tomorrow." I'm blowing him off. Thank God I had a real captain working that, Captain John Planska. He was a commander in Homicide, and we had worked together in OCCB narcotics on a major case with the mafia. And he also had a case where an undercover was exposed. He knew exactly what we had to do. So we had the tape. We notified the chief. Now, the chief at the time was Chief Edwin Dreyer. He was a tough nut. I got along good with him, but he was IAD oriented like every other chief. The problem was his deputy inspector was a complete fucking moron. He saw corruption where he was like Don Quixote with the windmills trying to trace corruption. Made a notification. They want to see us the next day. Okay. Now it's the next day. Report to borough headquarters. The captain's there before me, and he's being interrogated. I come in, and now the onus is on me. While I'm being interrogated and questioned, and of course I'm back and everything what the captain said, in comes this captain and this sergeant from internal affairs. "Where's the informant? We want to speak to him." I said, "That ain't fucking happening." The deputy inspector goes, "Do you know who you're talking to, Vernon?" I said, "I don't give a shit. I haven't completed the criminal investigation. I'm a detective sergeant. This is a criminal investigation involving the threat to a police officer." So now it starts back and forth. Everybody starts going this and that. And it was really funny because I don't know. I'm out there on a wing and a prayer, Bill, because I'm just like, I'm like nuts. I'm turning and saying, "Stop. I don't want to hear anything. If anything happens to this cop and I know him, I'll be the first person to be a whistleblower." So everything, calm down, Vernon. So the chief and the inspector had to go downtown for a meeting. That left the IAD captain and my captain and the IAD sergeant and me to hash it out. So we had a meeting planned to verify whether or not this was going to go down. We're going to get a taped conversation. I had TARU, Technical Assistant Resource Unit from the police department, wiring up a car and a NAGA recorder, and we're going to send the informant out to Queens with this to meet this guy to confirm the hit. So the captain is, we're going to participate in the surveillance. That's okay. So we have TARU radios. All right. I also have my own radio. We're all in nondescript cars. They got a Crown Vic. Okay. Now here's a guy that was under surveillance by the feds. You don't think he's going to spot a Crown Victoria with two guys with suits? So as we're going over the Throgs Neck Bridge, I get on the other channels. Everybody changed their frequency, and I cut the two fuckers out. Now they're on the surveillance. The meet didn't happen till 4:30 in the afternoon, and when we got the tape and we debriefed the informant, we couldn't believe it. It's not one cop they want to kill. They want to kill two. They want to get the case officer, torture him for the identity of the undercover, and then kill the undercover. Now, this is, at times against us, it's like the next day, and this is all happening. It's unfolding quickly. Get back to the command, and now the chief's back, the deputy inspector, and the captain, they're mad as hell. Why did you cut out the inspector? Why'd you cut out the captain from internal affairs? I said, because he looked like a fucking fire engine. That's why. We don't need fire engines on surveillance. Listen, by the way, shut up and listen to the tape. Oh, that was pretty ballsy. But the tape was scary. Tape is talking about two cops, not one. At this point, now everything changes. Okay, they're backing down. They want further corroboration. So I get the informant to make another phone call. I tape it, and we give them the tape to Internal Affairs. The next day, the entire case is transferred to the Queens area under Chief Stoll and the 16th Homicide Zone under Ahern. So I'm out there meeting with the chief of Queens and the chief of the Bronx Homicide and the district attorney's office, and laying everything out. Do you have a copy of the tape? Yes, we have a copy of the tape. What about the tape you made after? IAD screwed it up. They screwed up the tape. I said, son of a bitch, don't worry about it. I'm going to get more tapes later this afternoon. We want to have the game plan in place for the next day. I go back to the Bronx and I'm documenting everything. I get the informant. The informant calls me and says, listen, I want to confirm everything for tomorrow, for the next day, for Thursday, excuse me. And that's confirmed on the tape. About 9:15 that night, the informant calls me up, all bent out of shape. He wants to do it tomorrow morning, and he wants me to spend the night with him. I said, son of a bitch. This guy's a clever bastard. I said, listen, you're supposed to be the hit man. Get bad with him. Tell him it can't be done because the cops aren't going to be there till tomorrow afternoon. Come on, let's get with the program. This went on till 10:30 at night. I was like nuts. We finally push it off for Wednesday afternoon. At this point, we have everything in place. TARU has got the car wired up. Queens detectives are ready. We have a backfill. We have everybody in place. We're going out there. And it was nerve-wracking, Bill, because this guy, every time we had a plan, he reversed it. That's why it was called Operation Reverse. Every time we went one way, had to go another way. We get out to Queens, and they're circling the 113th precinct where Queens Narcotics was located. At a certain time, my friend, the officer, comes walking out and goes to his personal car. Unbeknownst to everybody, Lieutenant Ahern's in the back seat with a shotgun. Meanwhile, we got a helicopter, we got the aviation involved, we got cars, we got like 20 different units surrounding us. As the officer drives down the street, suddenly on signal, everybody jumps in, the helicopter comes down. It was like something out of the movies. It was fantastic. Of course, they're both brought in, and our informant is supposed to be wanted by the Fed, so he's taken someplace else, and we get this guy. It was a remark. How many times have you run operations and things go wrong? This was perfect. There were too many moving parts. That's why I was surprised it went so well. The next day hit the press. Everybody was talking. It was on the New York Times, the Post, the Daily News. It was, plot to kill cops is thwarted. Anyway, it was nice, and we got course, we got a commendation and everything was nice, but I was kind of upset that not everybody who was played an integral part was mentioned. Okay, only the chiefs were mentioned this. So I got a hold of the police officer's journal and I made sure that everybody in that case had their name mentioned. Detective Sergeant Larry Mullins from Taru, Detective Dennis Butler, Jim Kennedy, Ed Torres, and of course, Richie Rivera. And then I made a statement for the press. I says, if my detective didn't have the sources he had, we wouldn't have been successful. We may have been going to 2 police funerals. And that was it. And that
Now,
was
was the officers that were targeted, were they involved in putting away this big drug kingpin in his last case?
yeah. Well, the one was the case officer, my friend George,
Okay.
and the detective who also went by the name Manny. Okay, he was the undercover. And this was a big case. This was a Colombian drug dealer. It was 90% pure, the cocaine. I mean, the feds were involved, DEA. So this was serious.
Well, it's always great when you get a case like this that even though there can never be 100% perfection, there's always going to be screw ups when you're dealing with the human element. But the bottom line is you made the arrest, you solved the case, 2 cops didn't get killed, and you guys did a great job.
And he's never getting out of jail. That's for sure. So that was a good case. And then, of course, I'm doing other cases in the 7th homicide. I started doing some research on stage crime scenes. And one of the cases I had was kind of interesting because the husband had killed his wife, his common law wife. And he called, he tried to say that she had fallen down or something. He called for an ambulance. It was a Friday night in the South Bronx. The ETA on an ambulance is about 45 minutes. He got bored. So instead, he stripped her down, placed her on the floor with her legs open, and now reported the case as a rape murder. same location, 9/11. Anyway, we get there and the body's completely nude and everything. But the forensics don't work. There's no blood on her body. Her clothing is soaking wet. So you know that she was stripped after the fact. But the beauty of that case, and I always am, when I do instruction, I always talk how important it is to listen to the 911 call. Because in the 911 call, many times the person making the call is the killer. Okay?
Yeah.
And one of the books I included in my series, because I have 65 books in my series of books, is 9/11 calls and how they can be interpreted and how you can, basically get information from the 9/11 call that you won't get because it's pure information. There's no lawyer involved. There's no interrogation involved. It's being given by the person making the 911 call. So that was an interesting case.
Vernon, let me just stop you for 1 second. All of these, I mean, obviously, I forget the number you said, but in the Bronx homicide zone, there was over 250 murders a year in a 6-mile radius, which is unbelievable, that amount of violence. Now, as you're going through your career, at the same time, you're very analytical. You're analyzing what is good about what you do, what is bad, what goes wrong, what should be put on paper as police procedure, what should be deleted as police procedure. And that's a very tough thing to do because now you start dealing with the egos.
Yeah.
Because chiefs want to write that stuff. And the chiefs, unfortunately, aren't the ones usually that are dealing with this day to day. And they're dealing with the nuts and bolts of homicide investigation to know enough about writing procedure, writing, say, a checklist. I told you that now on the first DD5, on the computer screen, it says the basic dozen. And
the 12 steps, they must be alcoholics. All right. The guy who did it was an alcoholic. First 12 steps.
Yeah, the 12 steps. Yes, the basic dozen steps. And they have to complete that in their DD5s, in their complaint follow-ups, the basic dozen.
Well, what you bring into light here is chiefs don't go to court. Chiefs don't testify. Chiefs have no idea what the hell's going to happen. When you write something down, whatever you wrote is going to be nitpicked by the attorneys. So you have to know what to write and what not to write, what to keep in your head, okay, and what to put on paper. And people who are administrators who have never gone to court have no clue about that. Yeah, listen, this is since the beginning of time.
When they first came out with the online complaint system and the online DD5 system, I was very concerned because I was like, wait a minute. This is great in one way because a detective in a 2-3 precinct in Spanish Harlem in Manhattan can search a name citywide of every DD5 citywide at the click of his of a screen of his little keyboard, and he could find out, oh, that name came up in the 4-0. That name came up in the 5-2. Huge thing. And I mean, I used to say before we went to those systems, the NYPD was hitting 2 rocks together to make a spark because we were one of the last police departments to go to computers to join the 21st century. And it was so important. But the other thing is that the point I want to raise is now when you have all of this information in a DD5 system that's citywide, who has access to it?
Who has access?
That's a scary thing because, hey, my brother could have got arrested in another precinct. And who am I more loyal to, the NYPD or my brother? And I'm just using that as an example. I didn't have that happen, but
no, it's a perfect. Well, look who we're hiring. Okay.
Yeah.
But the other thing is this, the NYPD has always been behind the rest of the country as far as technology. When I went out on the road and I started teaching with some of these guys and I started doing instruction, they were instructing me on what you could be doing back in New York. So I was learning at the same time, which was great. But perfect example was Delaware. DuPont was located in Delaware. I used to do a program in the University of Delaware twice a year. I'd go down there and I'd be interacting with those different agencies. They had computers and information that we would have died for, okay? And they were ahead of us by 20 years. So you're right, but it's a two-edged sword. Who has access to it and who can find out what the information is? But getting back to my position as a squad commander, when they broke up Homicide, I got a command because I was a homicide detective sergeant. The first thing I had to do with my command was I had to bring it under the auspices of one unit. Because before that, under the PDUs, there were 3 separate units, 3 separate squads, and nobody talked to each other. I said, no, that's not how it's going to be. I says, we are one squad. We're one group. I don't care when the phone rings, you're all the same person. I don't want to hear about, oh, he's coming in 4 o'clock, this and that. At every unattended death scene, I want a detective, okay? And I broke up the teams to do that. I finally got everybody on one page. And that was important because you're one squad. You're not 3 different squads. And then I went to the FBI Academy, and that was another experience because the only reason I got picked because I was writing articles for Law and Order magazine. They wanted to debrief me when I got down there. So when I got down there, I took every course they had related to death investigation. Let me tell you something. They knew nothing about death investigation. They knew a lot about forensics, okay, and a lot about procedures. Every time they showed a case, it was somebody else's case with their name on it.
Right.
If you ask the question, oh, we can't talk about that. You can't talk about it because you know what you're talking about. All right. So now we go forward, and I'm in the 5-0 PDU, and of course, you think that you're isolated because you're North Bronx, but I had night watch. I was all over the Bronx, and I was monitoring other teams. We come up with a kidnapping one day, and the guy who was kidnapped is a numbers man from Manhattan. So once we get past the bullshit, because the initial report is that my father was kidnapped and he's a businessman, blah, blah, blah. Then you start questioning him, do a background check, you find out he's a KG, known gambler. Well, now I involved the task force, and we did a lot of kidnapping cases in the task force. We have a whole protocol. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't know who's listening to the podcast, but basically we were able to trap the phone, get the information. And when we knew where they were located, I notified emergency services and put the precinct notice, and we hit the location simultaneously, the door, through the window. We captured the 3 bad guys, guns, all kinds of stuff, and we rescued the person. So that was another nice case. And then we had the death of a school teacher, okay? And it was a gentleman who was a guidance counselor in a Harlem school. And his body was discovered on Sunday morning when he didn't show up to church. He was the organist, all right? I get a call at home. I had strict orders. I don't care when the homicide comes in. If I'm off vacation, whatever it is you call me, I come in. I come in, I get to the crime scene, and the crime scene looked like somebody had gone through the rummage through the crime scene looking, for gold and jewels and stuff like that. The only thing that didn't belong in that crime scene was that freaking baseball bat. I'm saying, how's this baseball bat get in here? There's no forced entry, okay? There's something wrong. So
Absolutely.
I do the victimology, and I can't stress how important is victimology in homicide investigation. Because victimology gives us information about who and what was going on in the life of the victim at the time that he or she was killed. And that's where you get your motives, your information, your possible suspects. Bingo, he pops up. Bronx sex crimes. He was locked up for sodomy involving a student in the school where he was the guidance counselor. Oh, okay. So I notify Bronx sex crimes. They get the information. We go to the school, and I get the most arrogant principal you ever met. The guy was a real racist. You'll refer to me as doctor. I said, good. You'll refer to me as detective sergeant, and you'll refer to my detective as Detective Cruz. Okay. What an arrogant prick. And he didn't know nothing about this. He knows nothing about this. Well, that's not the way it goes now, because Bronx sex crimes notified the school, especially because he's a guidance counselor, and made all kinds of notification. I involved the family. I felt bad for the kid because the kid's 14 years of age. Talked to the mother in Harlem, and she said, Sergeant, I tried to make a police report. I went to the 3-2 precinct. No one would take the report. I finally went to Bronx sex crimes, but then he was arrested and the charge was dismissed. I said, let me tell you something. I'm going to do the best I can for your family, but we got to get your kid. We got to get him off the street. I found out he was running numbers for Harlem's numbers location. So we put some pressure on the numbers people, and he shows up at his grandma's house on a Sunday morning. The grandmother knows about it. They notify us. Myself and Detective Cruz go down to the Harlem projects off of Harlem River Drive. And we get the kid, his mother and his grandmother. We bring them all back to the 5-0 squad, and we have a sit down. Let's have a conversation. Give everybody their rights. He's under the age. Let the parents know. And they encourage him to tell his story. And he tells a really horrible story. He got involved. The teacher got involved with him, and he was involved with oral sex and back and forth. And he would give the kid sneakers and this and that. Anyway, he invites the kid up to come to his apartment in the 5-0 on Broadway. The kid's a little reluctant. He brings a baseball bat. Well, it turns out that he was going to try to bend the kid over and have anal sex. The kid goes, that shit, and that's not going to happen. And now he gets into struggle. What looked like a burglary was the kid trying to get the nude photographs back that he had secreted and were using to extort the kid to continue the relationship. So there was no money taken or anything. And that case broke. It was a big story. School teacher, child under the age, blah, blah, blah. So I make a statement for the family. I says, this was a perfectly normal 14-year-old boy till he got involved with Mr. So-and-so, who was his guidance counselor, who ruined this boy's life. Oh, you should have seen the result. It caused a shitstorm. I never knew there were so many operatives in the gay world. I was being threatened by Colonel Moran of the Gay National Guard. You can't. And he was sending me stuff at the precinct that was crazy. The best part was the Board of Education was embarrassed, all right? So they tried to deny everything. And typical police department, the police department bends over because they make noise. I said, no. That's not how it went down. The Board of Education was notified. Here's the time, the dates, and everything else I put in the newspaper. So now I'm a number one target of the Board of Education. But we did the right thing.
Wow, that's some case.
It was some case, and eventually I get promoted to lieutenant. So that's great, because the first time they told me I failed. All right, I said, how could I fail? I wrote a textbook. I found out later how I failed. I'm doing a course down in Florida on the West Coast over in St. Petersburg. It turns out the coordinator was hired by the city of New York to help them pick people who had passed the lieutenant's test. It was an in-basket, then it was an interview, and then something else. Well, it turned out that the day that I was up there, they already had enough white people, so I was failed. They were actually taking people by color and by gender, all right? So I make a stink. The black guy from headquarters, he became a deputy inspector. He was up for lieutenant. He was detached from the police department. They told him he failed. So the three of us, me, him, and the guy who was a spokesperson, DCPI, were all on the list. They're going to reevaluate us. So they reevaluate us. Oh, yeah, by the way, you didn't fail. I knew I didn't fail. Anyway, I get promoted to lieutenant in December. It should have been back earlier. I think they put my date back later on. My chief of Bronx detectives wants to retain me. I'm his top homicide sergeant in the Bronx. Not only am I handling all these cases, but I'm handling cases for him. I'm also doing the homicide school. But Jimmy Sullivan, I don't remember Jimmy Sullivan. He was a chief of detectives. Jimmy Sullivan's nose was bent out of shape because I wrote a textbook and didn't give it to him to write. That's the ego cooking in, right? So the book comes out. So I'm up to get promoted and I'm supposed to be retained. And his response was, we're going to teach him humility. So I'm going to go to uniform to learn humility. So while I'm in lieutenant school, I'm getting approached by all these bad guy units, IAD, field control. You don't want to wear a uniform, Vern. You can work with internal affairs. I said, nah, my uniform fits fine. I'll be great. He couldn't believe it. I end up in the 4-6, was one of the shittiest precincts in the South Bronx. They call the place the Alamo. All right. It was someplace unbelievable.
It's 4-6 is still very busy to this day.
Yeah. Well, when I came in there, I didn't, how most people showed up to work with jeans and khaki. I would come in with a 3-piece suit and a briefcase. I'd go up to my locker, change. I'd come down in uniform. I'd go on the desk. I'm going to be the perfect desk officer. And what a pain in the ass. But I said, I'm going to learn humility. And a couple times bosses would come in. They go, you're on the desk? Well, why are you on the desk? I said, I'm learning humility. So anyway, I spent about 2 weeks just familiarizing myself with desk over duties and then go back to watch the troops get turned out. They weren't being turned out. They were turning out the sergeants. I said, whoa, this is not how it goes. I said, from now on, we're going to turn out the platoon like they're Marines, okay? I want to see everybody in perfect uniform. So I put all my stuff on, all my medals over there because I hadn't put anything on. I asked the sergeant, were you in the service? He said, yeah, I was in the Air Force. Good. I said, we're going to start shaping these guys up. Went in the back room, open ranks, march, this and open. Go back, you look like a bum. Go back, get this, do this. I'm throwing people out. They can't believe this, right? So as each platoon comes in, because everybody's not the same day. They're different people coming from different days. The other people would watch to see what would happen because sure as shit, I'd be sending somebody back to the locker. I said, you cannot go out to the street looking like a bum. You want to be respected? You look like a professional, for Christ's sake, okay? This is going on. So it was pretty short. Now they're catching on to it. I said, when you walk into the station house, you salute the desk. There's a flag behind the desk. I'm doing all the stuff we learned when we were rookies.
Well, Lieutenant, there's a lot to that. How you look and how you carry yourself.
Absolutely.
They're interconnected. And if you look like a slob, you act like a slob, you're going to be a slob.
Treat like a slob. Yeah. You're absolutely right, Bill. That's what I was doing. So one day, an inspector comes in from the borough command. The word was out that the 4-6 was very sloppy, and they're going to have an inspector. The borough command's going to inspect the outgoing platoon. So I smile when he comes in. He goes, oh, my God, you're on the desk? He says, I'm sorry to tell you this, Vernon, but I'm here to inspect the platoon. I says, no problem, Inspector. Come on back. So we turned out, platoon to 10, open. He couldn't believe it. He goes, what the hell? I says, turned him into TPF inspector. You know how he used to do that shit. He couldn't believe it. And every time I turned the platoon out, I would give them a little talk. And my favorite was the Sunday talk. All right, listen up. Gentlemen, ladies, today is Sunday. And I heard a rumor that Sunday's Cops Day. But you know something? Sunday's not Cops Day. It's God's Day. And you're working for God. So I want you out there. It was so funny. Within 3 months, I was back in the bureau. That son of a bitch, Jimmy Sullivan, retired. I got picked up. I was back in the Bronx.
And you were back in Homicide, right?
Well, it wasn't Homicide. It was the squads. By this time, they did away with Homicide. Okay, so I started off in the 4-2 squad because what do? You get a command for 3 months to familiarize yourself. Then you go to your permanent command. So I went to the 4-2, which is another shit house, and got that place organized. And then about 3 months later, I ended up in the 4-0 squad, and I loved that 4-0 squad because it was a kind of a mix. You had black, Hispanic, you had some old Irish. It was interesting command. And when I first got there, the first thing I did was I analyzed the homicides because I wanted to see, what they were doing. They had about 40 homicides a year. And 40 homicides is not bad in a precinct compared to 90. Okay. So I looked at the command. I said, wait a minute, what's going on? Team C has 70% of the homicides. How'd that happen? That's the way it is, boss. That's the way the cases came in. I said, well, that's not the way it's going to go. I was a detective. I was a detective sergeant. That's not the way it has to go. I'm telling you what we're going to do. From now on, when Team C is working, they're off the chart, by the way. When Team C is working and a homicide comes in, I'm giving 4 hours recall to the next team to come in. They got the homicide. That's what I did until it evened out. Then the other problem was in the 4-0 precinct area, there were 11 housing projects. Now I find out there's something going between the city and housing. I said, well, what seems to be the problem? I'm going to sit down with my counterpart in the 7 PSA, public service area. And I meet with him. I said, listen, what seems to be the problem between your guys and my guys? Well, your guys are making all the arrests. You guys are getting all the overtime. I said, well, that's not going to happen anymore. We'll split the arrests. I'm looking for clearance, not arrests, clearance. So from now on, when we have a case, you know that the city is the custodian of records for the homicide. You know that, right? Because we're the lead. We have to keep the records for homicide. But we're not going to steal any of your arrests. We're going to split them. We'll split the arrest and housing back and forth. We're going to work together. I said, you got 11 housing projects. I don't know about you. When I was a kid, you always get along with the biggest fucking gang, right? They got more people. When they went to a homicide, they had lieutenant, sergeant, 6 people. I show up with a lieutenant and sergeant, 1 person. Well, right. It worked out so well that we maintained a 90% clearance with homicides in the 4-0 squad. It was amazing. And the proof of the pudding is it's a matter of having communication and getting along with each other. When I retired, you know who hired me to teach homicide for the housing authority? The housing chief. I had a separate contract. So it worked out.
That's excellent. One of the things that happened, and you talk about a little rivalry between different police department groups. And when we came on, there was separate housing police, there was separate transit police, and there was NYPD. So there was some animosity, there was some jealousy. And then, of course, Bill Bratton, under Giuliani, was able to consolidate all 3 departments and get it to be one police department, the NYPD. So that, I think, helped a lot in investigating homicides in the housing projects, because in the busy neighborhoods, most of the homicides were from housing.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter was, because of that rivalry, many times the housing police didn't notify the city they had a homicide investigation going until 24 hours later. When they couldn't solve it, then they're calling us up. And by that time, you've lost the crime scene, you've lost a lot of the dynamics. So that was important to have that relationship. And it carried on. When I went to took over the homicide task force, I continued that with other housing projects and other precincts, because I had a good reputation with the other people, because they knew I was going to be a square shooter. And it worked out well. Now, I left the 4-0 and I get promoted to Bronx Homicide Task Force, and I get to become a lieutenant commander. That was a big deal because that's captain's money. And I think we mentioned this once before. Why would I take a captain test when I'm a lieutenant commander in charge of a borough unit, making overtime, okay, and not wearing a uniform and doing what I love to do best, homicide.
Right.
So,
Well, Vernon, they had to actually address that recently. In the last year or 2 years, no one was taking the captain's test. So they actually now allow captains to make X amount of dollars in overtime. They actually pay captains.
Fair. It's only fair.
Yeah. And so I don't know exactly what their contract is, but if you're asking guys that are working and they're making less than their underling, which would be a lieutenant, even a lieutenant commander, is making not just more than a captain, lots more than a captain,
Well,
So,
listen, when I retired, I had 800 hours overtime. I retired at the rank of an inspector.
right.
But the bottom line is, I was always behind the eight ball. When I was a cop, there was no overtime. I got promoted to detective. Cops got overtime, but detectives didn't get overtime. So
Yeah, yeah.
it was always like I'm at the wrong place at the wrong time. But in the seventh homicides, I mean, in the commanding office of Bronx Homicide, I incorporated all of my homicide protocols in the Bronx. Plus, I was teaching at the homicide school, and every time a squad got the case, we would bring a case folder with a protocol to follow. So I was getting my way as far as what I wanted. I wanted to professionalize a homicide investigation, and we had some interesting cases. I'm just thinking like some of the major cases we had, more kidnappings and things. But then the biggest case, the case that's going to be probably the end of my career, was a Larry Davis case.
Right.
Because the Larry Davis case was screwed from the beginning because this chief that I had, I used to call him Rotundo, okay? Because the guy was a patrol-oriented, anti-detective, arrogant SOB. All right, that's the bottom line. And I will never forget when I went to the first borough conference, when I first came back to the bureau as lieutenant. He liked to hear himself talk. So he would have a borough conference, all the squad commanders have to come. And he'd talk for 2 hours and say nothing. All right. So I'll never forget, I was sitting there for my first borough conference, and he said, "Oh, and you, Gebeth, you think you're smart because you wrote a textbook. I'll be running the homicides, not your textbook." I said, "Bullshit." This is going to be fun. So, yeah, it was. The Larry Davis case, if you don't mind me expanding on it a
Oh, go
little
ahead.
bit,
Yeah.
the Larry Davis case will be the end of my career because basically what happened is this thug named Larry Davis, he lived in the 4-4 precinct. He was ripping off drug dealers, but he wasn't only ripping them off, he was killing them for their crack and their money. And he had committed a quadruple homicide in Fort Apache in the 4-1 precinct on the eastern side of the Bronx. And we went and covered the scene and processed the scene, and we got 4 dead drug dealers, okay, Spanish and Dominican. We have plenty of shell casings, but we don't have much evidence, but it takes time. We end up lifting a print off the cash box, and the print matches Larry Davis. So now we know we have a possible suspect. Now, the intelligence from the 4-4 was that Larry Davis and his crew are knocking people off left and right, not only in the Bronx, but in Manhattan. So Larry Davis becomes a primary suspect. In the meantime, he did a homicide in the Bronx, in Manhattan, excuse me. So he's all over the place. So we notify the 4-4 precinct, anti-crime. Everybody's got a picture of Larry Davis. I said to the chief, as his chief, "Listen, let me assign this case to my fugitive squad." He goes, "We don't need elitists in the Bronx, Gebeth. The squads can handle the case. We don't need big shots coming in." I said, "But chief, I have a fugitive squad for that reason, so people don't get hurt. A fugitive squad knows everything about the fugitive, his girlfriend, his wife, his haunts, what he does, what kind of guns he has, and where he goes." I says, "Because it's a 24/7 thing. And when they go after him, and we apprehended people a hell of a lot more dangerous than Larry Davis, because nobody gets hurt. No, the precinct will handle it." So sure as shit, every time Larry Davis was spotted, they had to put together a quick apprehension team. That's how people get hurt. Okay? And on November 19th, Larry Davis was supposed to be in an apartment on Fulton Avenue in the Bronx. The squad went, the precinct, notified emergency service, put together a bunch of people who never worked with each other, and they go to hit the apartment. Well, they made so much noise outside with those trucks that Larry knew they were coming. When they came to the door, Larry was shooting over his nieces and nephews, and the racist cops, because you know we're all racist according to the news media, withheld fire because the kids were there. We got 6 cops shot in one incident. We never had 6 cops shot in one incident. And why did that happen? Because the Chooch didn't allow my fugitive squad to do this. Thank God, by the grace of God, there was a hospital across the street, Bronx, Lebanon. But Bill, you and I have worked together. That's the kind of hospital, if your partner brings you there and you survive, you want to kill your partner. It's not a preferred location.
No, no.
But they were able to stabilize the office. The next day, the offices were transferred to Bellevue. the shit hits the fan. Now, that night, I wasn't working. I was home. I did a day tour. When I got a call at home, I thought one of my detectives, Tom, one of my detectives was dead. He was shot through the neck. Mary Buckley had her teeth blown out. Rodriguez was shot in the arm. The captain had a graze wound. I mean, this was just a horrible situation. I raced down from Rockland County. I swear to God, I got there in 20 minutes. Lights and siren. And I've handled police homicides before, so I know what we got to do. I didn't go to the scene. The scene's going to be complete turmoil. I went to the command, and I'm putting together an extraction team. An extraction team are the people that go out and pull people out of their cribs to get information on fugitives. We had information that Larry was at a location on Webster Avenue. I'm about to go into the street when in rolls Rotundo. No detectives in the street by orders of the police commissioner. We don't want a racial incident. There's a racial incident. What racial incident? We got 6 cops shot. That's attempted murder. And I'm here to babysit you, Gebeth. Okay. At 5:30, he took his fat ass home. At 5:35, I was in the street with 12 handpicked detectives, all of whom would deny they were in the street because those are the kind of people that work for me. And we missed Larry Davis at Webster Avenue by an hour and a half. The next day, Alpha Bravo tours, 12 on, 12 off. The chief of the department is personally going to handle this case. I'm going, oh my God, this is going to be great. We don't want any detectives in the street. We want them to detect. You know what that means?
Do nothing.
Yeah. In other words, get your informants and burn them because we don't want you in the street apprehend them because it's going to be a racial incident. So and now it gets even funnier. Now they put together the Larry Davis apprehension team, a very convoluted operation put together by headquarters. They have a convoy of emergency service, community representatives, patrol officers, and when you not locate Larry Davis, you call us and the convoy will come in. But the convoy can only be led by a super chief. So we're the only department in the world arrogant enough to have the rank of super chief.
Super chief,
So the
yeah.
chief had to be called Patton. The next chief was Custer. The next chief was Halsey. The next case was Nimitz. The next chief was Bradley. It had army helmets and shit. And this is the funniest thing you ever saw, Bill. And now this is going on like for 3 weeks. They can't figure out why they can't catch Larry Davis. Every time we think we know where he's going to be, we can't go. They have to go. Now, you can't drive down streets in the Bronx and the Crown Vic without raising up the whole neighborhood. They're coming in with a parade. At one point, I said to the chief, Chief, please, let me put my people on the perimeter. So when he sneaks out, we can grab him. You're a fascist, Gebert. So I'm a fascist. I'm a realist. This is how you apprehend people. I got this is going on. This is nerve-wracking. I'm in a squeeze play now. I'm getting squeezed from above, telling me, get your detectives, get more informants, get out there. My detective goes, boss, what the hell's going on? So I'm in a box. At one point, somebody from the news media that I know calls me up. Vernon, what the hell's going on in the Bronx? I said, well, we should be moving like lightning. Instead, we move like a large blue elephant. Someone in headquarters knew I said that, even though my name wasn't on this. That sounds like something Gebeth would say. So I was put on notice. So there's a deputy inspector detailed to stay in my squad to make sure I don't go out with detectives. I'm under house arrest. This is bad. So the pressure's building, Bill. The pressure's building. I'm the kind of person that when pressure builds, it's about, it's going to blow pretty soon. December 6th. Friday afternoon at 1 p.m., I get a phone call from one of my detectives. He's sitting on a wire. Larry Davis is back at the Webster Avenue location. Now, at that point, I'm supposed to notify command and control. I tell the detective, do not notify command and control. You have notified me. At this point, I'm insubordinate. The deputy inspector, who used to be a homicide commander, goes, Vernon, I'm out of here. In other words, if you're going to commit suicide, I don't want to watch. Because on that day, on December 6th, 5th, okay, at that time, I committed commandercide. All right. I sent 38 Black and Hispanic undercovers that I had standing by into this housing project. Nobody out, nobody in. If they want to go out, they can't go out. They want to come in, they can't come in. When you have that building locked down, you call me, we'll bring the white faces in. I put the trucks on notice 5 blocks away. Stand by, we're going to hit an apartment. Turn the radio. I can't hear because of radio chatter. I turn off the division radio. I'm on the portable talking to my people. I put the radio back on. Where are you? What's going on? I says, get those trucks to such and such an address, twin park houses on Webster Avenue. Forthwith, we're going in. Took him 15 minutes to go 5 blocks. Why? It was Custer's turn to lead the parade that day. He's stuck in traffic in Manhattan. Those trucks cannot move unless a super chief is present.
Oh God.
Now I'm in front of the building. The trucks roll up, the air brakes, people look out the window, everybody knows something's going down, including Larry. He can't get out because my people got him trapped. The only way is up. The chief of patrol, Custer, comes charging in. By whose authority have you done this? I said, by the authority vested me in common sense. And by the way, Chief, that Beetle Bailey helmet makes you look like an asshole. It came out. Bill, it came out so quick, I couldn't stop it. He turned around to see if anybody heard me. I ran in the building. I didn't know where to go. Well, it didn't take him long. Now I'm downstairs at the command center, and all 3 chiefs are there screaming at me. Custer, the chief, Patton, and Rotundo. There was a housing lieutenant watching this. He says, Vernon, it was the funniest fucking thing I ever saw. The 3 chiefs are screaming at you. They're red in the face, and you're smiling, going, are you finished, Chief? Are you finished? Are you finished? Now, Jones, I'm going to call him Jones. You know who it really is, the chief of the department. He's a very sardonic personality. He would call his captain, he would call his lieutenants, his deputy inspectors and chiefs, he would call them captain, their less civil service rank, when he wanted to scare them. So he says to me, so Vernon, are you lieutenant commander or a lieutenant? A lieutenant commander would know how to obey orders. I says, Chief, own up to the fuck you want me to be. My people got them in the building. They're not your people. They're my people. Okay, your people have them in the building. Then the next guy chimes in, why did you do this, Gebeth? Why? Because I wanted to get him caught this time. And then finally, my stupid ass goes, you were insubordinate. I said, no, I improvised, adapted, and overcame. He's in the building. We got him. The flogging stopped when Larry was on the phone from someone's apartment above, telling his family, tell the police I left the area. So now we know he's in the building. We couldn't find where he was. All of a sudden, this gentleman comes out, and he's allowed to leave the building. He comes back with Chinese food, so they stop him. What's going on? Well, Larry Davis has my family upstairs. He sent me out for Chinese food. This is the guy whole city couldn't find. So now we know what apartment he's in. We call the hostage negotiators. At 7 o'clock in the morning, he finally surrenders after being told he can talk to the press and the FBI and everybody else that he wants to talk to. He's led out of the building by my first grade detective, Andy Lugo. God bless him. He's since left us. He was one of my top detectives. He's got him in custody. The police commissioner, Ben Ward, the racist, and the chief of the department, Patton, walk him through a phalanx of police officers while people in the building are yelling out, Larry, Larry. It looked like something out of a shitty movie. Some female reporter came up to me and says, Vernon, didn't you call this raid? I says, nope. I says, off the record, yes, but nope. The chiefs, look at the generals. They caught him. All the generals are going to have a news. So they're having a news conference. There was no community unrest. Larry Davis is unharmed. Blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, we got cops in the hospital. They could care less. So you and I both know I'm in trouble because you can't get away with this shit. So I'm kind of trying to lay low. And the next week, they're giving themselves awards like they conducted a military campaign. Chief, Captain, Chief, look at the fuck out of here. So I'm laughing so hard I almost fall off my chair. Well, I fell off my chair in January when the guy I called the complete fucking asshole becomes the chief of detectives. I'm done. There's no way he can maintain me in my position.
Right.
So it was kind of interesting. I know I have to get out, and I have to do an undercover operation to get out. And I did. I conducted a real good operation. And before I did that, I had a serial murder case in the Bronx involving push-ins, and then an off-duty cop is killed in the 5-2. I had that case, and my time's running out. And the thing with the off-duty cop was kind of sad because I had, again, it came in when I was home. I had worked a day tour. It was Friday. The detectives call me up. We got a police officer homicide, boss. I says, I'll be right in. I hear big Rotundo's big mouth. He's been pissed ever since the Larry Davis case. I don't need Gebbeth. I'm going to handle this case. Tell him to stay home. That's unheard of. You don't tell the lieutenant commander in Bronx homicide that he shouldn't be at a police officer murder case.
Right.
That's how bad it was. So I knew it was coming. It's coming. I could feel it coming. Saturday morning, I get a call from the zone captain. Vernon, can you come in? The chief fucked the whole thing up last night. So now we're back starting from square one. You know, we did what had to be done, and 5-2 anti-crime detectives did a great job. We had a suspect identified by Sunday morning. By Sunday afternoon, we had him in custody. And he's in the 4-8 precinct, and he reluctantly confesses to my first grade detective, Louis Hernandez. And now, according to protocol, we have to notify the district attorney's office, and the DA has to come down to authorize the arrest, which I always thought was horseshit. Okay. So it's a pretty bad winter storm. We got about 6 inches of snow on the ground. It's getting worse and worse. In comes this little galoshes wearing Coke bottle glasses midget, about 5'2". He's the DA. And he's got a Napoleon complex. And he's telling me what he wants. He goes, this, I want a room. Blah, blah, blah. And then he says, I don't want any detectives in the room when I question the defendant. I said, yeah, well, I says, you should have somebody in. Take the handcuffs off. So, oh, this is going to be good. He orders the detective to take the handcuffs off and orders the detective out. About 10 minutes later, we hear hysterical screaming like a woman coming from the lieutenant's office. The suspect jumped out the window. Okay. Now we got to scramble. So I'm saying we got to move quick. Looking, my detectives go one way. I went another way with another detective because I saw the footprints going towards Webster Avenue. You can't get to Webster Avenue from the 4-8 because of the railroad tracks, Park Avenue. So they go to Tremont. I go down the next block to come across. And we see a city bus working its way down very slowly because it's a major snowstorm. We lights and siren, pull the bus over. We jump on the bus with guns drawn. Larry Davis, not Larry. The suspect's not there. The suspect's name was Maldonado. He's not there. 2 precinct cops see what's going on. They come racing up. What's going on? I said, we have an escaped prisoner. There's nothing on the radio, boss. I said, I don't want it on the radio.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I don't want it on the radio. This is his description. So meanwhile, I go back to the command and things are heating up. All of a sudden, the 4-8 anti-crime, they reported they have a suspect. They spotted him. They chased him into a building. The son of a bitch almost fell off the roof. Now, can you imagine if he went off the roof? They would have swore we threw him off the roof. Okay, right. This is how the media works. We get him back and say, oh, thank God. But now it's out. It's on the radio. Cat's out of the bag. In comes Rotundo, and he had a second in command, a real nasty son of a bitch. I called him Inspector McNasty. Now, yeah, well, he was a nasty individual, and you know, when people are rotten, they're rotten through and through. He wants to give charges, and he's talking to the chief about giving charges to my first grade detective. Now, this guy, let me tell you something, Bill. This guy got locked up during the MAP commission. He was a captain. He was on the pad in the 6th Division. The people who testified against him, 2 sergeants, okay, they got immunity, got their pensions. His lawyer turned it in that they were ratting him out to save their own skin, and he was innocent. By some quirk, he was acquitted. Now, you would think that if somebody came that close to being locked up and going to jail, you think they might come back with a little religion?
Yes.
Not him. He came back twice as nasty, and he hated my guts, and I got no use for him. Now, don't forget, when I was on Operation Uncover as a detective sergeant, a lot of names of police officials came up with the mafia talking about them. They weren't pursued because no one was supposed to interrupt Operation Uncover. At the completion of Operation Uncover, these guys were supposed to be brought down to internal affairs. I don't know what happened. A lot of them didn't go. I kept notes. I'll tell you why I kept notes. Because if any one of those guys tried to fuck with me or my men, I would confront them with what I know about you.
Where the bodies are buried. Vernon, we're at the hour point, and this went so fast. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. These stories are fascinating, and I mean, we barely got to scratch the surface. But I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to give you your final thoughts.
Well, my final thoughts are I went out of the job with my back straight and my head high. Okay. And a whole second career opened up for me, which was practical homicide investigation. So God has a plan. And it worked out well for me, my family, and everybody else. And so my final words are, God bless the NYPD and God bless America.
Thank you so much, folks. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff with retired Lieutenant Commander Vernon Gebeth, the godfather of homicide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.